Only in America could quitting your job get you kissed by your boss in front of 50 armed men. And yet there I was, trembling, wondering if my knees were shaking from fear or from him. It was supposed to be a simple, clean break. I had my resignation letter folded neatly in my pocket, the words carefully written the night before under the dim light of the barracks. I had rehearsed my speech firm, polite, professional.
Noi mouschen, no hesetaschen.
I just wanted out. But life has a cruel sense of humor. The morning was cold enough that I could see my breath as I walked across the gravel lot toward the Alpha Commander's office. The American flag flapped in the distance, the sound of it snapping in the wind almost too sharp, too loud for my nerves. My boots crunched in rhythm with my heartbeat. His name was Captain Logan Harker. Alpha, decorated, respected, feared. He was the kind of man who could silence a room with a glance and make an entire platoon move like clockwork with a single barked order. To me, though, he was something else entirely, something dangerous in ways the Army never trained me for. I'd spent months trying to keep my head down, to keep the strange pull between us buried under layers of military discipline and denial. But it had been getting harder. The stolen glances, the brush of his hand against mine during equipment checks, the way his voice dropped just for me when no one else was listening. And then there was the night on watch duty, the one I never talked about. I reached his office door, hand poised to knock, when his voice boomed from behind me. Private Collins, front and center. I turned, startled. He wasn't in his office, he was in the yard, surrounded by rows of soldiers already standing at attention for morning drill. His eyes locked on mine with that unreadable expression, the one that always felt like it saw too much. "Yes, sir," I said, moving toward him. When I reached him, he didn't give me a chance to speak. "Fall in," he ordered. I hesitated. "Sir, Now." The word cracked like a whip, and I obeyed, stepping into the line of soldiers. My palms were sweating. I was trapped me resignation letter suddenly feeling like a fragile, useless piece of paper. Logan paced the line, his boots hitting the ground with military precision. He barked orders, corrected postures, but every so often his gaze would flick to me. A quick glance, a half-second too long. I felt it like heat against my skin. When the drills ended, he called out again. "Private Collins, with me." We walked toward the far end of the yard, away from the others, but not far enough to be out of sight. I could feel the eyes of the entire unit on my back. "I came to tell you something," I began, trying to sound steady. "I know," he said simply, turning to face me. "You're quitting." The words hit harder than I expected. "Yes, I can't do this anymore. And then he stepped closer. Too close. His sense-eater, smoke, something darker filled my senses. His gaze locked onto mine, and I saw it. The crack in his armor, the unspoken plea. Before I could move, before I could even breathe, he wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me flush against him. My breath caught. "Sir." "Shut up, Collins," he murmured, and then his lips were on mine. Gasps erupted from the line of soldiers behind us. I froze, every instinct screaming that this was wrong, dangerous, career-ending. And yet, my hands found his uniform jacket, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping me standing. It was a kiss that was both a command and a confession. When he finally pulled back, his voice was low but firm. "You're not leaving." I swallowed hard. "You can't just." "I can," he interrupted, his hand still on my waist. "And I will." Something in me cracked. The months of tension, the careful distance, the unspoken words it all rushed to the surface. "You don't get to decide my life, Logan." His eyes softened at the sound of his name. "You think this is about command? What else would it be about?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "This," he said simply, brushing his thumb along my jaw. "You, us." The soldiers were still staring, whispers rippling through the ranks, but it felt like the world had narrowed down to the space between us. I shoved the resignation letter into his chest. "I can't be here. Not like this." He took it, glanced at it, then tore it clean in half without breaking eye contact. "Then don't be here as a soldier," he said. "Be here as mine." The words were reckless, dangerous, and they hit me like a punch to the chest. My instincts screamed to run, to protect myself. But my heart wanted to stay. The thing about alphas, they don't beg. They command. But in that moment, with the wind whipping around us and the entire unit watching, I realized he wasn't just commanding me. He was asking. And I didn't know if I had the strength to say no. The wind cut between us, carrying the faint sound of boots shifting on gravel as the soldiers tried to pretend they weren't hanging on every word. Logan's hand was still on my waist. His grip unyielding but not cruel, like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. "Logan," I whispered, my voice raw. "If you keep me here, you'll destroy me." His jaw tightened. "No, Collins. I'll protect you." "That's not how this works," I shot back, forcing a step of distance between us. The sudden loss of his warmth made the cold bite harder. "You're my commanding officer. You know exactly how wrong this is." For a moment, he looked like he might let me go. His eyes flickered, his chest rising and falling with something unsteady. But then, as if the thought of release was unbearable, he closed the space again. "I don't care what's wrong," he said, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "I care about what's right for us." My laugh came out bitter, shaky. "Us? There is no us, Logan. There's you, and there's me, and there's an entire military code between us that says this doesn't exist." He reached for my face, fingertips grazing my cheek. "Codes can be broken." I flinched, not from the touch, but from the truth in his voice. He meant it. He'd burn his career down if it meant keeping me here. "You're insane," I murmured. "Probably," he said with the faintest, almost broken smile. The murmurs from the ranks grew louder. Logan turned sharply toward them, his voice cracking across the yard like a rifle shot. "Back to your duties." They scattered, boots pounding against the gravel, but I could still feel their curiosity like eyes in the back of my neck. When it was just us, I exhaled slowly. "You can't do this, Logan. You can't force me to stay." "I'm not forcing you," he said. "I'm fighting for you." I wanted to hate him for saying that. I wanted to tell him that he had no right, but my chest ached, my hands were trembling, and somewhere deep down, the part of me that had been lonely for so long wanted to believe him. "I'm not an alpha," I said softly. "I'm not built for this kind of war." He cupped my face, his thumbs brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "Then let me fight it for both of us." That night I couldn't sleep. The barracks were quiet, save for the occasional creak of the old wooden beams and the distant hum of the wind outside. My bed felt too small, too cold, too empty. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his eyes when he tore my resignation in half, the way his voice had softened when he said my name. I told myself it was all wrong, that what he'd done was reckless, selfish. But the memory of his kiss lingered like heat under my skin. At midnight, I gave up on sleep and pulled on my boots. The moonlight made the yard silver and still. My feet carried me without thinking to his office. The light was on. I knocked once, quietly. "Come in," his voice called. When I stepped inside, he was at his desk, uniform jacket off, sleeves rolled up. The muscles in his forearms shifted as he wrote something on a file. But when he saw me, the pen stilled. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. I shook my head. "You?" He gestured to the stack of papers. "The army doesn't sleep." I hesitated in the doorway. "Logan, what are we doing?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "I don't know. But I know I'm not letting you walk away without knowing if this could be something. Something that could ruin both of us?" I asked. "Something worth risking everything for," he corrected. I swallowed hard. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," he admitted. "But nothing worth it ever is." Silence stretched between us. Then slowly I crossed the room. He stood as I approached, his height casting a shadow over me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a fresh piece of pap-era resignation letter I'd rewritten that afternoon, just in case. I held it out to him. He looked at it, then at me. I can't promise you a safe road, he said quietly. But I can promise you I'll walk it with you. My chest tightened. And then I did the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever done. I tore the letter in half myself, right in front of him. The smile that broke across his face wasn't the smug, commanding grin of a man who'd want it was something softer, something rare. Relief, gratitude. He stepped forward, closing the gap between us until there was no space left. His hands framed my face, and when he kissed me this time, it wasn't about possession or defiance. It was about a future we didn't know how to build yet but wanted to try. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. You have no idea how hard it was to watch you walk toward my office this morning thinking I might lose you. You still might, I whispered. His hand found mine, fingers interlacing. Not if I can help it. The weeks that followed weren't easy. The whispers didn't stop. The rules didn't magically bend for us. And the thread of discovery was always there, sharp as a knife in the dark. But there were stolen moments, quick brushes of fingers when no one was looking, brief glances across the yard that carried entire conversations. One rainy evening, as the unit packed up after drills, Logan caught my arm and pulled me into the supply shed. The scent of damp canvas and metal filled the air. They're transferring me, he said, voice low. The words hit like a punch. When? 2 weeks. My heart sank. So this is it? He shook his head. No, this is the start. You can't promise. I can promise I'll find you, he said firmly. No matter where they send me. You're mine, Collins. And I'm yours. The shed was cold, but his arms around me were warm, solid. I closed my eyes and breathed him in, memorizing everything just in case. When the day of his departure came, the unit gathered to see him off. He stood tall, every inch the Alpha commander, giving final orders with the authority that had made him both respected and feared. But when his gaze found mine across the yard, something unspoken passed between us. As the truck door closed behind him, I felt both the ache of loss and the spark of something unstoppable. Because maybe love wasn't about being safe. Maybe it was about standing in the open, heart exposed, and daring the world to do its worst. Months later, I got the letter. It was short, handwritten, and smelled faintly of cedar. Collins, orders came through. I'm stationed back at your base. Keep my spot warm. L. When I saw him again, stepping out of the transport truck, the yard around us faded. The rules still existed. The risks were still real. But when he reached me, he didn't hesitate. In front of everyone again, pulled me close and kissed me like it was the only thing that mattered. And maybe it was. Because in that moment, I knew. I hadn't just stayed for the job. I'd stayed for him. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.